Hello and a warm welcome to everyone. We would like to wish everyone a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Samantha from Safeopedia, and here at Safeopedia, it is our mission to support the EHS professionals, operational folks, and any safety-minded individuals with free safety information, tools, and education. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to the dedicated professionals for the great work they do on a daily basis in keeping our workplaces safe. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording as well as the slide deck to everyone in a few days. We also want to remind you that there will be a live Q&A at the end of this presentation, so make sure you get your questions or your comments into the GoToWebinar console, and we will get back to them at the end of the presentation. Today, we are proud to present the EHS Managers Challenge, Building Credibility and Buy-in Within Your Organization. This Safeopedia webinar has been made possible today by our sponsor, EcoOnline. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you today's panelist, Eric Gizlison. Eric is the Executive Director and Principal Trainer for the National Association of Safety Professionals. In his tenure, he has championed the organization to new milestones, achieving CET accreditation for continuing education and ANAB accreditation for two of the industry's newest safety certifications. He has spent over 30 years in the safety and environmental fields. During his career, he has served as the safety manager for the largest pork processor in the world, the automotive industry, and the pharmaceutical industry. He received his BA in Environmental Studies from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. With that, I am very grateful to have you all sit back, relax, and enjoy this presentation. With that, Eric, let's jump into it.
All right. Well, thank you again for Safeopedia for allowing me to do this webinar, and EcoOnline for sponsoring it. And, I appreciate the opportunity and everyone taking the time out of their busy schedules. As Samantha mentioned, I've had well over 30 years in the EHS field, and within that 30 years, probably one of the biggest obstacles that I've faced as a safety manager is really getting that management commitment, the employee buy-in, really empowering the workforce. And in fact, there was a recent poll from OHS magazine that said that the number one issue for safety managers is management support. So it's an ongoing theme. It's something that we want to unpack in the next 45 to 50 minutes. And so what we're going to cover in this webinar is really, what makes you valuable as an EHS professional to the team, right? And how do we really get buy-in from the C-suite executives, right? What do we need to do to present to them why EHS is such an important part of the elements of a organizational system? And then how do we mesh safety into organizational culture? And there's a lot of talk in the safety world that you really shouldn't say safety culture anymore, that it's really organizational culture, and safety is an element of that. Folks, I don't want to get into the semantics of that. Safety culture or organizational culture, whatever you want to call it, safety needs to be an integral part of it. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about empowering the workforce. How do we get the buy-in, not only from the management perspective, but employees, because that's a very big issue, is getting the employees to buy into your safety message. And then finally, we're going to talk about, there's a lot of confusion with certificates versus certifications, and one of the ways we build credentials as a safety professional is to have some of these certifications and these ongoing CEUs, that sort of thing. So we'll talk very briefly about the difference between the two, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about that. So I always like to start these presentations with the obvious question. What is safety all about? I mean, is it really about these regulatory agencies, OSHA, MSHA, NIOSH, that sort of thing? Is it about standards like HAZWOPER and lockout? And the resounding answer is really no, right? OSHA compliance is one element of safety, but really safety is about your people, right? It's about your peers, it's about your employees. Unfortunately, safety is also can be about death and preventing deaths in the workplace and driving down our fatalities. We look at the statistics on fatalities in the workplace. right around in the United States, and I know some of you guys are international, but right around 5,000 people die on the job in the United States. And you look at those statistics and say, well, maybe that's not so bad if we got about 160 million people in the workplace. Well, statistics are a funny thing. You can make them look good and you can make them look bad. But if you divide 5,000 by 365, you're talking about around 13 people that die every day on the job. And folks, I'm going to tell you this, that 5,000 number is skewed because OSHA says those are from accidents on the workplace. That doesn't even include illnesses from repeated exposures to chemicals over long terms. So we're talking about death and we're talking about agony and suffering because we're talking about not only the people who are hurt, but the families of the people are hurt. And so for us as safety professionals, those statistics mean a lot, right? We have to drive down those statistics. It's our job as a safety professional to kind of get to the heart of safety, which is not just OSHA compliance, but driving down injuries, driving down workers' comp. If you think about it, people will live or die based on our effectiveness as a safety manager. And that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of pressure. So we're talking about preparation and dedication and really passion. You've got to get your management commitment and employee buy-in to really have an effective safety culture. There's just no two ways about it. Safety's not a one-person job. So, is our life dedicated to saving the lives of other people in the workplace? If not, you're in the wrong profession. And I say that not to be critical, but I say that because passion and dedication, we certainly don't do this job to become millionaires, right? So we have a responsibility to our employers and our employees to provide a safe workplace. If you look at your safety culture, right? If you look at safety culture is really just the attitudes and behaviors of your employees as it pertains to safety. I've worked at many facilities, or like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and a lot of times they look at safety as, a necessary evil, right? So I like to ask these questions. Where does safety rank within your organization? Okay. Is safety considered a one-person job? I love going to facilities and saying, who's responsible for safety at your facility? And people will point to Joe, the safety manager, and say, yeah, Joe's responsible for safety. And that is the complete wrong answer, right? Safety is a team effort. And is your company recognized for its safety record, right? Are you doing things correct? Now, I'm not talking about the sign at the front of your plant that says 1 million man hours worked without a lost time work injury or without a recordable. In fact, I'm actually not a fan of those signs because sometimes those give a false sense of security from the perspective of that we don't have any injuries at this facility, so safety is really, top number one priority, et cetera, right? In fact, if you're basing your safety incentive programs on lack of injuries, you are woefully missing the boat from the perspective of what a safety incentive program should be based on. It should be based on leading indicators, not lagging indicators. And then finally, who is blamed when an accident or incident occurs? Is it you? Is it the safety manager that's blamed? We have a lot of turnover in the safety industry, from safety professionals that get blamed or have to leave, or they don't get the management support and they have to leave the company. Or is the employee blamed, right? If we're doing the blame game within our organization, then that is a culture issue as well. So we need to look at that from the perspective of how do we remedy these situations if they're occurring at our facility. I like to look at safety as part of an organizational pillar that starts, obviously, production is going to be one of those organizational pillars, right? And then quality. We've got to have quality in production. That's what makes us money. That's what keeps us efficient. That's what keeps us having a job. And then we have to have customer satisfaction. And a lot of times I see these 3 pillars as this is what makes up our organization, these 3 pillars, and they forget that safety and environmental should be one of those pillars as well. It should be on equal footing. It shouldn't be production versus safety environmental, right? Safety environmental should not compete with quality, production, and customer satisfaction. It really should enhance it, right? That's the message we need to be sending to these C-suite executives. This is not a necessary evil. This is a good thing. Safety and environmental compliance is a good thing. I found this on a website from a Fortune 500 company, and I like it. I like what this CEO says. He says that our company's values, right, not priorities, but values form the foundation of our corporate strategy in every aspect of our business life. We are committed to always living our values because we believe that's how we do things is as important as what we accomplish. An important part of valuing the individual at our company is maintaining an unwavering commitment to safety and health. And then he goes on to say, we cannot meet our objectives without everyone's attention and involvement. We all need to be personally accountable. Wow. Hey, that's a keen concept, right? Being personally accountable for your own actions. And then he goes on to say authentic leadership engagement. So this to me, now whether they are really walking the walk versus talking the talk, I don't know, okay? But at least they have a mission statement that specifically lays out the management commitment. And every company should have a mission statement that includes safety, health, and environmental aspects as part of their mission statement towards customers and employees, et cetera, okay? So how do we get a seat at the C-suite table, right? Now, I don't know what C-suite means to you guys. That could be the CEOs of the company, that could be the president, that could be the vice president, that might be, you know, shareholders. It depends on the size of your corporation, or maybe it's just your plant manager or your director of operations. The way we get a seat is to ask for a seat. We have to request the time. And we're going to come to that meeting prepared with statistics and information about what we're doing to drive safety at our facility. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. Okay. We need to be discussing with management and the C-suite executives our accomplishments, right? All too often, I see facilities that when somebody gets hurt, or God forbid a fatality or major lost time work injury, that's when it goes to the executives. Did you hear that so-and-so got hurt or killed on the job? What was the safety manager doing, or what was he or she not doing? So that's when we get that finger pointing, and that's not what we need to be doing. We need to be preaching about what we're doing right at the facility and have these meetings on a regular basis. I'll tell you a quick story. When I started at that meat processing plant, this was probably 15 years ago, I was told I needed to come to the production meetings every morning. So I would sit in these meetings, and I'm going to tell you, this facility, folks, we average, now this was the largest pork plant in the world, we averaged 35 to 45 recordable injuries per month, okay? So we had our work cut out for us when they hired me. But I would sit in these daily production meetings, and for the first 30 to 40 minutes, the plant manager would just verbally assault these supervisors about not meeting their numbers, not getting product out the door, not hitting their quotas, quality issues. I mean, he would beat these folks to death. And I mean, they were just spent. And then he'd turn to me after that and say, hey, okay, Eric, and then what do we have on safety? And it was just like, well, okay, safety is really important at this facility, and we've had these issues. And people would look at me like, are you kidding me? Are you crazy? And I did that for about 2 weeks. And then I finally went to the plant manager. I approached him. I said, look, we've got to do something different in these meetings. Safety should go first. Now, whether you're living it and breathing it, at least it needs to be talked about first as a number one, not priority, value, because priorities change, but this shows value. And to my surprise, he agreed with me. So we started doing safety first and really getting that out in the forefront of people's mind. And we drove injuries down in a year and a half, 67%, and workers' comp claims by 88% in about a year and a half. Now, it wasn't just doing that. Obviously, we had a lot of other things we did, but it was about getting the safety message out first, having quarterly meetings, semi-annual, annual, et cetera. You've got to get in front of the C-suite executives to make your case. So you would probably ask, how do we do that though? Why is it going to be important to these C-suite executives? Folks, if you haven't implemented a safety management system at your facility, you need to do so as soon as possible, right? There's all sorts of safety management systems. We've got names for them, the ISO 45001, which replaced OSAS 18001 a couple of years ago. In California, you've got the I2P2 program. There's ANSI C10. There's all these different programs about safety management systems. But what is a safety management system really supposed to do? Well, I will say this, if anything good came out of the pandemic, okay, it was thrusting safety to the forefront in a lot of these executives' minds and making them understand the importance of safety as a value and an important part of the structural integrity of their company. So a safety management system, it's all about continuous improvement. Now, if you're ISO certified, you guys know this very well. I was a big part in the automotive industry with ISO certifications, both for safety and environmental. And it's all about continuous improvement, right? Systematic, explicit, and comprehensive process for managing safety risk. Folks, it's not just about OSHA compliance, right? It's about goal setting and planning and measuring performance. I am a numbers guy. I want to see numbers that help me drive my injuries down. We have to, if you're familiar with PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, which is part of Six Sigma and some of these other continuous improvement programs, a lot of times this is used for quality. It can also be used for safety. But the bottom line is it's driving culture, okay? And every element, whether it's I2P2 or, I mean, every program, safety management system, I2P2, OSAS, ISO, any of these have really these 6 or 7 elements. Management commitment, right? That's the big one. Are they committed to helping you as a safety manager drive injuries, worker comp, et cetera, et cetera? And then employee involvement, right? Hazard identification. Well, there's the OSHA perspective of it. Identifying hazards, both physical and psychosocial. We'll talk about psychological aspects of it here in a few minutes. And then how do we do corrective actions? Obviously, education and training of employees and management is important. And finally, the Plan, Do, Check, Act aspect of it is program evaluation. Is your program effective? Are you driving down injuries? Are you driving down workers' comp? Are you retaining employees? That type of thing. This is a part of a safety management system that everybody should be involved in. And you look at it from the perspective of, okay, what is my value? What's my value to this organization? Folks, if your management doesn't understand the value of safety, then you're probably not doing your job as a safety professional, because employee safety should be the #1 value. The value of your employees to management should be of utmost concern, especially with what's been going on with COVID and some of these other aspects of what's been driving safety. We'll talk about civil and criminal liability very quickly. Again, I know some of you folks are international, so this might not apply to you, and even OSHA compliance, but even in other countries, you probably have a Ministry of Labor that also oversees the regulatory aspects of safety compliance, personnel morale, and insurance. So let's talk about these very quickly. Now, I could spend a long time. We do presentations on civil and criminal liability, but as a safety manager, do you know that your liability is typically based on failure to warn? Failure to warn. That's why we have signs and labels for everything out there, right? It's the #1 lawsuit in the United States is failure to warn. And I love, if you haven't caught on to this sign, the sign on the presentation, this sign has sharp edges. Do not touch the edges. Also, the bridge is out ahead. Okay, so we have signs that tell us everything that we need to know to protect us from a liability perspective. Now, whether your employees read these signs and follow it, that's the issue. That's civil liability. Civil liability means monetary. You're going to get fined for it. Okay. And then there's criminal liability. And my gosh, I could go into these cases in detail, but these are just examples of individuals who went to jail or went on probation. That Massey Energy, that was a huge one where 29 workers in a mine died. Turned out they were doing deliberate cover-up of safety violations. He served a year in prison for it, which was very unusual at the time. He was actually sentenced to 39 years, but I guess he got a good attorney, but he did a year in jail for that. Bumblebee tuna, this was actually where a worker was cooked alive in a steam cooker. The director of operations and, folks, the safety trainer was charged and convicted with willfully violating lockout procedures. They received probation, community service, and a $19,000 fine. More recently, in 2019, an employer was charged with manslaughter after a trench collapse. I will tell you that I see it more in the construction industry where they're pushing for criminal liability of owners, managers, safety personnel. Is it common? No. Can it happen? Yes. Typically, it's willful neglect, right? You knew better and you did it anyway, okay? But that's one of those things that we need to drive to these C-suite executives and these plant managers and whoever it is in upper level management, that they are liable for the safety of the employees, and it's our job to make them aware of that. So that's civil and criminal liability. Again, if you're in the United States, you probably know that OSHA fines have doubled in the last 6 or 7 years. They initially were doing like a $7,000 fine for serious and $70,000 for willful, and they've more than doubled in those last 7 years to make up for the consumer price index inflation. And my goodness, with inflation what it is now, I shudder to think what the fines may go up to next year. So we want to avoid fines, right? A lot of people think that OSHA is a toothless tiger, meaning there's not a whole lot of issue with OSHA because it is an understaffed agency. But for those of us that have dealt with OSHA, it's no fun experience to have OSHA come into your facility. And your job, if they do fine you, is to drive those fines down. You're going to request a reduction in fines. They fully expect you to do that. If you don't, you are not doing your job. You want to have willfuls go to a serious and seriouses go to non-serious or other than serious violations. So our job, I can tell you that a rule of thumb that if you're a smaller employer and you have a certain number of employees and you have a good history and no previous OSHA violations and you're doing good faith effort to fix the issues, you typically get a standard 40% reduction in fines if you follow the safety protocols from an OSHA perspective, 40% reduction, and that's without taking it to an administrative law judge. So you want to fight these fines when at all possible. And then finally, a big one is insurance. At that meat processing facility, we paid tens of millions of dollars in worker comp claims and premiums. It was just unfathomable what we spent. And as we began to drive those injuries down, we would go back to these insurance agencies and say, hey, we need to do a reduction on our premiums. Our EMR, our experience modifier rate has gone down. We need to get a reduction in premiums. So this is one of those that's a cost savings for the company. And I've always been an advocate for going to the powers that be in the facility. Sometimes it's hard to prove a negative. People look at you and say, well, we haven't had any recordable injuries or we haven't had any lost time work injuries. So, well, I guess you're doing your job, so everything's fine. It's like, wait a minute. We can be doing better. We need to start tackling the first aid injuries or the near misses or those catastrophic potential injuries that could happen because we haven't spent the money on a capital acquisition request or something like that. So insurance aspect of it is a big one. right? And then believe it or not, personnel morale is a huge value proposition for managers. There have been numerous studies on the fact that people who are safe work harder and are more productive. This isn't warm, fuzzy stuff. This is, hey, I can contribute to your bottom line because people work harder when they feel safe. I've seen studies where they just did better lighting in the facility. They put more lighting in it, and people worked harder and were more productive and more efficient because they could see better, right? So sometimes it's not rocket science to do some of this stuff, but it's based on this whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That we as a human species have a need to feel safe, whether it's at the home or the workplace. So it's right up there with food and water as a need to feel safe. Okay, not going to eat a cheeseburger if you're being chased by a bear. So you kind of get it, right? Safety is an innate need for us. So I just named off 4 or 5 different reasons why we are of value to your organization. And that's what you have to take back to management. You have to show your value, right? I don't care if management's motivation is not about the safety of the employees. Maybe they don't care. I hope that's not the case, but I bet they do care about the bottom line dollars. And if you look at the industry, gosh, folks, in the United States, okay, in the most recent statistics on lost time work injuries in direct costs was $171 billion, billion with a B, in just direct costs alone that's costing companies. So we've got to go to management and say, this is what we're saving. This is what I'm proposing to you. By spending $1 on safety, we typically get a return of investment on $3 in the form of less OSHA fines, less workers' comp claims, increased productivity, and that's ammunition for you to increase your budget. Okay, we need to buy more fall protection. We need to repair these cracks and crevices where people are walking and slipping and falling. We need to implement a machine guarding, retrofit pieces of equipment. So you've got to use these return on investment for your budget. And I didn't make up those numbers, by the way, on the $1. That's the National Safety Council. And folks, if you are not part of the National Safety Council, and this is, we're a part of the National Safety Council, but we're a completely separate entity, but they do some really good statistics on safety from the demographics of who gets hurt on the job, how they get hurt on the job. NSC provides a lot of good, valuable information that you can use to go to your facility managers or your president or your CEO and talk to them about ROI. Hope that makes sense. So we have this challenge, right? We have the challenge to get the commitment of the managers and to get the employees to buy in. And 20, 30 years ago, when I first started into this, it was all about OSHA compliance. Have you complied with confined space, HAZWOPER, lockout, machine guarding, hazard communication, all these different Code of Federal Regulations? If you complied with that, you're good. And we know now that that's not the case because it's really about the psychology of safety. Now, whether you're a fan of behavior-based approach or human organizational performance, these are just different buzzwords out there. I mean, behavior-based safety has been around for a while, started by Scott Geller. He was kind of the pioneer, and then you guys may have heard of Todd Conklin. These are just tools in the chest that you can use to drive down injuries. And how does psychology work into this? Well, we got to figure out why our employees violate safety rules, right? Is it number one, a lack of knowledge? Maybe they just didn't know, okay? I bet two is a big one. Inconsistent enforcement makes the rules value questionable to the person, okay? Perception of the rule is unnecessarily punishing or expectation of personal benefit. That's one of those that, hey, if you get more product out the door, you get a bonus, right? Forget safety, we want to get product out the door, okay? Rules restricting use or operation of equipment are not compatible, or even complacency. So here's the deal. Whatever it is, it's all about the people's behavior, right? Why are they doing the things that they do? Well, typically it boils down to a state of mind, right? Employee state of mind. Now, I'm going to tell you this. This statistic is mind blowing. Think about this. You could have a 100% perfectly safe work environment, right? 100% OSHA compliant. You've got all of your housekeeping is great. Your walking areas are marked properly. Fall protection is railing, machine guarding, electrical, everything perfect. And you would still experience 80% of your injuries in the workplace. Okay, why? Because it's the employees, it's the at-risk behaviors, right? We look at people's attitude. Well, I can't measure attitude. Okay, is safety important to you as an employee? I mean, it is if it doesn't interfere with production. And we get complacent about it because our attitudes create behaviors, and behaviors create habits. All right, and habits are typically driven by complacency, or we get distracted, or we're frustrated, or we're tired. Okay, most of our injuries are going to be from these 3 or 4 bullet points, right? Why are people getting hurt? Okay, it's not because there's a guard off it, it's because they stuck their hand into that piece of equipment and bypassed the guard, right? Bad habits. We also refer to it as normalization of deviation, right? Normalization of deviation, meaning we allow these behaviors to occur because we got bigger fish to fry, and I'm not really going to enforce wearing hearing protection because I'm more worried about fall protection. So we allow people to do things and we deviate from what our plans and programs tell us we're supposed to be doing. And that is not a good thing. That is going to be a safety culture issue. So then how do we create a successful safety culture with all of these obstacles, all these barriers, the human aspect of it? Safety is counterintuitive to the human experience. Okay, when you think about it, somebody's going to say, yes, I want to be safe, but are they going to do the things that allow them to be safe? I always ask safety professionals in my classes, how many of you guys speed? Have you ever sped in your car in your life? Okay, and invariably most people are going to say, yes, I have done it. Well, why would you do that when we know that statistically more car crashes happen from speeding? Okay, because we want to get to where we're going. We want to do things quickly. We want to do things expediently. We want to do things comfortably without wearing personal protective equipment. So all these kind of fly in the face of us and present obstacles as safety professionals. So what we need to do is kind of measure our safety culture. Okay, and one way of looking at it, and there's a lot of these different models out there for measuring safety culture. Okay, there's the DuPont-Bradley safety curve, and I know these are hard to read on your screen, so I kind of broke them out for you, right? And this would be the progression of an effective safety culture. And this is based on 4 stages. You've got reactive, dependent, independent, and interdependent. Reactive, okay, reactive just means, hey guys, it's a free-for-all, right? Nobody's taking responsibility. We don't have plans or programs. Safety is kind of a matter of luck, and accidents happen. You know what they say, it happens, and over time they do, right? Nobody wants to be in this position as a safety manager, and I have taken jobs where this was the case. I see this, unfortunately, folks, a lot in the construction industry. Okay, and I hope that those of you in the construction industry understand that plight. It's a difficult industry to be in. So we want to go from reactive to dependent, right? Dependent means, hey, we've got some management commitment, right? And we're putting some rules in place. And if people would just kind of follow the rules, then we could drive injuries down. And we're at least showing to our employees that, hey, we've got some rules and regulations you need to follow. And if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And folks, that's not the best way to approach from a safety culture. And we'll talk about progressive discipline, but that's not the best way to approach it. Then you've got independent stage. Independent is a lot better. right? Individuals take responsibility for themselves. They're doing the right thing for the right reason, right? They can make a difference with their action. And you'd think that would be the top of the food chain, but really we want to go one step further, and that's going to be interdependent. Interdependent means, hey, I'm not just responsible for my own actions. I am my brother's keeper, right? I'm going to stop somebody else from doing something an at-risk behavior, something foolish or taking a shortcut. Okay, we're not going to accept low standards and risk taking. And they believe true improvements can be achieved as a group and that zero injuries is an attainable goal. And there's a lot of talk about zero injuries. Should you really even say that? Is that really possible? Folks, I don't care if zero injuries is not possible. That should be the ultimate goal. You can't sit there as a safety manager and say, well, we had 10 injuries this year. Next year, I only want 5, right? The ultimate goal should be zero injuries, whether or not you think that's attainable or not. Okay, so we look at these safety cultures, and you got to figure out, you got to assess where you are on that scale. And how do you measure it? Well, folks, you should conduct a survey. There are lots of there's lots of software out there for conducting surveys. There's lots of information. You want to determine what employees' attitudes are and what their knowledge is from a safety perspective, right? Are they involved in the existing safety program? Perception is reality. That's just a fact. And then from that information, we glean where our weak points in our safety program are, and we start attacking those weak areas based on perception. And this is just one example, right? There's a lots of these out there. You can get them free. You can hire companies. We partner with companies to do culture surveys. So there's a lot of opportunities out there to do these surveys. All right. I threw this slide in because one of the aspects that I see in a lot of companies is I'll go in and talk to employees and they're like, you know what? They say, they talk the talk. Management says they really care, but they don't, right? And from a safety perspective, from a safety management perspective, we need to look at the way we're perceived by employees in a management role. Do we have the ability, right? That's the perceived competence. Do we know what we're talking about? Are we knowledgeable? Do we care, right? Our benevolence, the degree of care or concern, okay? I had an open door policy at my facilities, man. People would come in and tell me their personal problems, and I'd spend a lot of time counseling employees on stuff that had nothing to do with safety, but that showed my care, and I really did care. I cared about these employees, and one thing that's for sure, employees outside of the workplace, ultimately, our goal is to make sure they're safe outside of the workforce through employee assistance programs and things like that. And then integrity, what, you know, your honesty and openness. If we have an injury that occurs, was management at fault? What can we do better? Let people know that you're fixing these issues and that you're being open and honest about it. Okay, we have to motivate our team, right? The safety, this organizational structure is the sponsor, which is your upper level management, right? You, as the safety, you're the agent of change going out to your target, which is your employees. Now, motivating your team, look at that last bullet point, the 20-60-20 rule. Okay, that's a concept that 20% of our employees want to do the right thing. You're going to get buy-in from those employees immediately. Hey, safety's great, it's important. I'm all about it. 60% of the company employees are going to say, man, I guess it's important if you say so. And then 20% of the employees, you're just not going to get the buy-in. Now, is that a hard, fast rule? No. But a lot of people will, or a lot of companies will try to tackle that lower 20%. And I'm here to tell you, that's not who you should be concentrating on. You should be concentrating on the 60%, right? Because if we can get 80% of our people to buy in, then that 20% is going to follow the herd. They're going to see, hey, this is something that is supported by management. Most of these people are doing it. They're either going to get on board or they're going to get another job, or hopefully not, but they might get hurt. And then they're going to be terminated for not following rules and regulations, potentially. So that's the motivation aspect of it. Getting supervisors, you can have the greatest commitment from management and employee buy-in, but if you don't have your supervisors, your frontline management employees buying in, then you're going to be spinning your wheels, I can guarantee you. At several of my facilities, our supervisors were rewarded by production only, right? You get more product out the door, you get bonuses. We changed that completely at our facilities, okay? Their bonuses were based on doing safety inspections, making sure their people were wearing PPE, doing adequate incident investigation reports. All of this stuff drove them, and if they didn't do this each month, they got a deduction. So getting your supervisors and getting your employees to report, right? That last bullet point, you can only get safety feedback from you guys, okay? How do we have leadership engaged? My gosh, I could spend an hour on this, right? They've got to be a part. If you're ISO certified, you know that it's a requirement. If you have an ISO certification auditor come in, they're going to ask, how did you get management involved? So I'm not going to read this list off for you because we're starting to run out of time, but I will look at number 3, exemplify safe behaviors. Folks, there's nothing worse than having a plant manager or somebody in a management position not wear PPE out on the floor or do something that's not in coordination with what you're saying in your safety and health programs, right? But these guys in management, and these guys and males and females alike, should be out there on the floor talking to people about safety, getting involved, doing inspections, popping in on your safety committee meetings, sitting in on these meetings, giving feedback on accomplishments. There's so many ways that leadership can be engaged, and the same goes for employees, right? Employees can be both. Folks, if you don't have an active safety committee at your facility, that's an issue. You need to have your employees involved. Let me tell you, they're going to be your eyes and ears on what's on the floor and what are you doing, what are people not doing correctly. They're going to be reporting this back to you. They should be involved in inspections. They should do incident investigations, risk assessments, all of these different things you need to have your employees involved in so they feel empowered. Let me tell you, there is nothing better than an employee who gives you feedback and you go out and fix an issue based on what they told you. It really empowers them. People love getting positive reinforcement from you as a safety professional. Okay, and we educate them about engagement. We share opportunities of how they become engaged. And look at bullet point number 2, measurable input and output objectives. Okay, in other words, as a safety committee, folks, we've had 15 slip, trip, fall entries this year. Our goal in the next 6 months is to drive that down by 50% or drive that down by a certain number. So we plan, do, check, act. We implement what our changes are, and then we do follow-up. And so we see measurable input and output. Now, again, that's going to be based on recordables and near misses and things like that. But sometimes you do have to base some of this stuff on your lagging indicators, right? But we want to see numbers, and we want to drive those numbers down. So that's the aspect of engagement. What are the challenges? Folks, we know the challenges. It's the priorities, right? Production and these other issues versus a value. Safety, again, should not be a priority. It should be a value, right? How do we measure our successes? Well, I told you, you're looking at lagging indicators, and you should be measuring everything, not just recordables, but first aids, near misses. If you really get into it, you should be measuring unsafe acts and unsafe conditions as well. And then getting buy-in from the knowledge perspective, reinforcing, and motivating your employees, right? Motivating your employees can be difficult. So what motivates an employee? Well, again, I could spend a long time on this, but believing in your safety program doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. You look at that DuPont-Bradley curve. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I've never worked at a facility that was 100% completely interdependent. We've worked close and we've had elements of it, but buying into a safety culture takes a long time. And the desire is is individuals, right? It varies from individual to individual, okay? And then you've got the fear as a motivator. Now, I will make this point very quickly. In the safety world these days, it's all about, it's never the employee's fault, right? Even if they do something, I hate using this word, dumb, but right, if they do something that they shouldn't do, then that's management's fault for allowing that to happen. And that can be true in a lot of cases, right? That goes back to that deviation, that normalization of deviation. But progressive discipline does work at facilities. Is it the best way to do it? No, you're going to get quick short-term response, but it will get the word out that you're not kidding about enforcing safety rules and regulations. And it does tend to get people to start thinking about safety. If the fear of losing their jobs and motivation, so be it. That shouldn't be the motivation, but if it is and it keeps them safe, okay, then we work on the building the culture from that to these more long-term goals, right? We want to appeal that last bullet point to the emotional part of the brain. Why do we want to be safe? Because we want to go home to our family and our friends at night. We want to raise our children with 10 fingers and 10 toes on our body and not have to worry about things like that. So we appeal to the why aspect of it, kind of the emotional intelligence aspect to our employees to get them to buy into our safety program. Because look at this slide. Folks, the highest safety performance that can be expected from people is the minimal level that's established, reinforced, and maintained by action. In other words, you can't put all these safety rules and regulations in place and then not enforce them, right? Otherwise, your program is not gonna have teeth. And people are gonna be like, yeah, I know safety says we're supposed to do that, but here's how we really do it at this facility. So you don't want to be in that situation. You want to drive the fact that the safety rules and regulations are there for a reason and they're going to be enforced, okay? And that's the negative aspect. You also need to coach the positives, right? I am a big believer in attaboy and attagirl. Going up to an employee and saying, you know what? I see people lifting incorrectly all the time, but you lifted the proper way that I taught you in the class, or you keep your area super clean. Man, I really appreciate what you do from a safety perspective. You want to talk about empowering your workforce and getting them to buy in? Acknowledge what your employees do well and what they do safely, and that will reinforce that behavior. Okay? And then finally, credibility as a safety professional is difficult. I've had, my plant manager at one of my facilities at an automotive plant come up to me and say, Eric, I need you to do an arc flash analysis of all these electrical panels. And I said, I'm not qualified to do that. And he got angry. He said, you're a safety professional. You're supposed to know this. I said, no, I'm supposed to manage safety, and I'm supposed to manage those areas that if I'm not comfortable with that level. And I had to show him the calculations that were involved in determining arc flash on electrical panels, approach distances, and PPE. And he finally got it. You can't be everything in the world of safety, right? We can be a general practitioner, but we can't be a specialist in industrial hygiene and everything. But we can continue to educate and build our credentials, and I'm a big advocate in that. So a lot of people say, I took, let's say, for example, our certified safety manager. I took your course, am I a CSM? Okay, well, you're a you took a certified safety manager course, okay? It's a certificate, and most of these certificate courses out there, they're great courses. They're about going to a class and taking a test. But the difference between a certificate and a certification, okay, a certification is an actual test, right? So a certificate, if you look at that first column, you did the training, right? You could be new or experienced, you completed the course, right? You can put it on your resume in the education, knowledge of course content, and maybe a degree to prepare for certification. Maybe it's a prep course or CEUs that can be converted to academic credits. Certification, you actually pass an exam. Combination of education experience, maybe it's a bachelor's degree with a combination of experience in the field, indicates competencies, and it typically you get that post-nominal designation. You get those lovely letters behind your name. Usually that requires continuing education, et cetera, et cetera. So the difference between those is one is a class that you receive a certificate of completion, and then the other is an actual test that you take typically from a third-party vendor, and typically closed book. Okay, common certifications, NASP, we have our Master Safety Professional and Certified Safety Director. These are upper level certifications that don't necessarily require a degree if you've got enough experience in the field. Okay, we felt like there was a niche in the market for people that didn't have a degree. And again, I'm an advocate for going to get your degree if you can, but if you can't, you can still get these professional designations. BCSP is another agency, very well known as the CSP, the Certified Safety Professional, and ASP. Now the CSP does require a 4-year degree. They also offer non-degree certifications like the Safety Management Supervisor, Construction Safety and Health Technician, Certified Instructional Trainer, and then IHMM. They Institute of Hazardous Material Management, they have a CSHM and a CHMM. Now, folks, there's a lot of other certifications. I don't have time to go in this class. The reason I mention these three, okay, is you want to make sure that they've been accredited by an outside agency. Ours is accredited by ANSI, so is BCSP's, and so is IHMM's, right? You want to make sure that these certifications are accredited and that they're, because let me tell you, there's a lot of certifications, quote unquote certifications out there that don't mean a whole lot. So do your research and make sure they're legit. All right. So that's kind of the difference between certificates and certifications. So let me go ahead and wrap it up. The bottom line, guys, you got to bring value to your organization. And we showed you the ways you do that, right? Protection from liability, driving down workers' comp, making sure OSHA doesn't come in and fine and cite and fine you, right? And medical costs. So we drive those and show return on investment with management. We motivate our employees based on the psychological motivators. And again, I'm a big advocate in continuing your education, building your credentials to give you that credibility you need within your organization. Because bottom line, folks, your success equals the company's success, okay? There's a little bit about our information about our company. You can visit us at www.naspweb.com. We provide a variety of these different trainings and certifications that I've talked about. And with that, I'll turn it over to a Q&A with Samantha.
Hey, Eric. Well, thank you so much for all of the great information. As Eric just mentioned, now is the time for that Q&A. So if you have any questions, or you have any comments, or anything you want to talk to Eric about, make sure you get it into their chat box there, and we will get to it now. So Eric, we often hear that C-suite are less likely to listen to a challenge or an issue. And I know that you're a person that likes to refer to challenges and issues and problems as opportunities, but we don't often hear our C-suite have those because we have so many issues or problems. So how do we bring value and not just problems when we are approaching the C-suite? Should we have a plan of action, or how do we start?
That's a great question. The way you start is preparing. You know, I hate to look at it from this perspective, but C-suite executives look at bottom dollar. What is the cost associated with these injuries? So I typically go to these meetings prepared to show them either A, what we've been spending on medical costs, on workers' comp claims, on premiums going up, OSHA citations and fines. And then if you don't have that stuff, if you're doing pretty well, then you look at it from a perspective of finding statistics within your industry, right, that support these numbers that you're talking about. So if you're in construction industry, you're not having injuries, you can say, hey, in the construction industry, falls account for X number of dollars in workers' comp claims per year, and we need to buy some more fall protection to avoid these costs. So go into these meetings requires a lot of preparation, and you typically want to keep it in financial terms if that's what these people are looking at. Obviously, we're worried about the value and the safety of the employees, but a lot of times they're looking at numbers and how you provide value from a financial perspective to them.
And how do you go about, what if you're not in a position of accessing those numbers? How do you prepare for that?
you should be in a position. You should have access. If you're reporting to HR, HR needs to give you those numbers. You cannot be of value to your company if you don't know the numbers associated with injuries within the facility. So you need to have access to that information. If you don't have access, you need to request it.
All right, perfect. So we have a question coming in here. They say they just started at a new location. They're having trouble with an employee buy-in. They say also supervisor doesn't want to be the bad guy. They're discussing mostly PPE, wearing ear pods rather than ear protection, and not wearing safety glasses. Do you have any advice or how to approach?
Yeah, I'll tell you, you need to get that group together for whether it's a tailgate meeting or 15 minutes and talk to them. There's some startling statistics on injuries that have occurred because of earbuds, listening to music instead of having your hearing protection in. So I always like to start meetings like that with a case study. This happened to this individual while doing this, which resulted in that, right? You need to grab these people's attention and make them understand why it's important. It's not a safety rule because we're being mean to you. It's a safety rule because this has happened at other facilities for this reason, and I see it occurring here, and it needs to stop, right? So that's starting out any of your training with a presentation of a case study is a very effective tool in getting people's attention.
Absolutely. And we find it in everyday life. As soon as you bring an anecdote or, as you say, a case study into it, you're providing real life evidence, which sort of gets the wheels turning a little bit more. So hopefully that helps.
Agreed.
All right, this person says they perform quarterly audits and other aspects of leading indicators in preventing injury. They'd like to know how this can be transformed into usable safety statistics, such as decreased injury rates, seem to be lagging indicator, and not great safety metrics.
So your leading indicators should be the driving force in determining potential injuries at the facility. Lagging indicators, it already happened, right? I mean, you still have to do corrective action, but your leading indicators are a very, very valuable tool in determining what may occur based on what people are seeing. So you guys need to take the information on those audits and put that into some sort of matrix that will determine risk associated with what they're finding in these audits. I know companies like the Eco Online that are sponsoring this have those types of software. You need to get away from the paper, right? And take these leading indicators and plug them into some of these software programs that will determine risk, and that way you can attack those areas based on the things that they're finding during these audits. So it's a powerful, powerful tool.
Absolutely. I know so many of us are so comfortable with pen and paper, but leaning into this software and technology, my best recommendation is use it when you can and not when you have to. Get a handle on it, understand it, and really lean on it.
100% agree.
All right, perfect. So this person asks, and just so you guys all know, I know we're at the top of the hour here, so Eric, we won't keep you much longer. But if we ask a question and you have to hop off, no worries. This is recorded and we'll send everybody a copy of the recording at the end of this. And we'll also send all of the questions to Eric so he can answer them offline if you wanted to get in touch with him. So we'll ask a couple more and then we're going to wrap it up. So as a new person in an establishment that has high hazard rates and previous fatalities, what's the best introduction to encourage credibility and trust?
Ooh, that's a good one. So again, with what you're telling me, you need to take the information and break that down into why these fatalities occurred, okay? And as a new safety professional within that organization, how are you going to tackle this to make sure this doesn't happen again? If you're having fatalities that occurred for similar reasons, that is a huge red flag that the company's not learning their lessons. If they had 3 falls in the last 2 years that resulted in fatalities, something's not not happening that needs to be happening. So I always encourage new people coming into an organization to grab that bull by the horns and talk about, hey, these fatalities occurred. Here's the reason why, and here's my solution. Your upper level management don't want to hear all the problems. They want to hear solutions. Samantha jokingly talked about it as not a problem, but an opportunity, right? An opportunity to solve that problem for them and make your employees safer. So from that perspective, that's how I would attack that.
Fantastic. And like I said, if you wanted more info from Eric, type it in the chat, let us know your email. We'll have him reach out to you. So our last question here before we wrap it up for the day, it's a little bit longer. They say 20% of Americans have learning and attention deficit issues. OSH is not taught in schools. They use a complicated communication system with many difficult to interpret words and signs, etc. So many employees will have serious issues with being able to buy in and engage in OSH training. Would it not be a good idea to assess OSH literacy issues and levels when recruiting and training new employees?
That is such a great question, and an area that's near and dear to my heart, because a lot of the companies that I worked for had minority population that struggled with reading and comprehending. And I'm not just talking about minorities from the perspective of racial minorities. I'm talking about other folks that had learning disabilities just because they hadn't been well taught in school. So, but I'm going to tell you that as a safety trainer, it's your job to break down that technical, hard to understand jargon into easy, understandable, digestible nuggets, right? And it can be done. And it needs to be done, obviously, in a language that they understand if we're talking about true minorities like Hispanic and other non-English speaking individuals, okay? But from the perspective of, you know, reassessing OHS as a field, that would be difficult to do. I mean, because it is technical information. You're talking electrical safety and lockout and confined space entry, you're talking chemical and toxicological terms and concepts. It's difficult, but as a trainer, and this is what I do for a living, you can break that down into stuff that people understand. You can use everyday terminology that they get. And my gosh, you can go to YouTube and some of these others and find practical examples of concrete examples of what this means so that they can actually see it. A lot of people are not auditory learners. They're visual learners or they're hands-on. In fact, most of our employees learn by doing. So they don't have to know that lockout tagout is 29 CFR 1910.147. They need to know how to put a lock on a piece of equipment and understand that that's for their safety, right? So I would recommend, in fact, the rule of thumb is 70% hands-on, 30% lecture for any of these OHS regulations. And that would be my recommendation, is teaching these people with hands-on methodologies.
Fantastic. That was such great information as always, Eric. So before we wrap it up today, is there anything you want our audience to keep top of mind or take away from today's presentation to ensure that they make the right steps moving forward?
Well, I just want to reiterate the fact that I understand your difficulties. I hear it all the time from safety professionals because I teach safety professionals for a living. And it's a struggle, but it is something that you can overcome. You can get the management commitment, and it takes time and it takes effort and it takes passion and dedication, but you can definitely do it. And you know, reach out to me for any tips or any strategies or anything like that. I'll be glad to help you. I got a lot of people that are a phone call away or an email away, so let me know how I can help you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Eric. And of course, I want to thank NASP for allowing you to be here, and our sponsor, Eco Online. If you want more information from them, be on the lookout for our follow-up email and you can get in touch with them and look into those safety softwares. Get away from that pen and paper. So on behalf of Safeopedia, I want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar, and thank you so much for staying online for this Q&A. We will be sending out a copy of the recording and the slide deck to everyone in a few days. So thanks again, and thank you to the dedicated safety professionals for the great work they do on a daily basis in keeping our workplaces safe. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.